These are the men and women of Beaver Valley, the bravest of the brave. They fought fearlessly for their country, their city, their community, and for the ideals we share as Americans. They served proudly in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Here now are their stories, their own experiences in their own words, the words of the heroes of Beaver Valley.
I went on active duty at the end of August of +65. I was supposed to get as a distinguished military graduate also my first choice of assignments, which I had asked for Germany, but it came through as being assigned to the Canal Zone. And I was not at all interested in going to the Canal Zone. So while I was at Benning, I talked to the TAC officers there and said, well, what can I do about this? And they said, well, we can't do anything for you, but you can write to the Pentagon. So I wrote to the Pentagon and said, hey, I was supposed to get this assignment and would really appreciate the chance to go to Germany. And they changed it. They sent me to Germany. And if it hadn't been for writing that letter, I would have never met my wife. I was assigned in Germany first as a mechanized infantry platoon leader. Shortly after I got there, the Army started to pull out officers and senior NCOs for Vietnam. So we got to be very short of people. In those days, rank came very fast as there was this big build-up for Vietnam. I made company commander 11 months after I arrived in Germany, something that normally didn't happen until you were a captain. In the fall of '67, I got orders for Vietnam, which I knew were coming, but was surprised when I got an assignment as a district advisor position. And I really didn't know what that was all about, but as things turned out, I saw a totally different side of the war. Before I went to Vietnam, I went down to Fort Bragg in North Carolina, and I spent 3 months there in the Special Warfare course, which taught us about Vietnam and duties as an advisor. When I got to Vietnam at the end of March of '68, I had an orientation in Saigon, and then I was taken to upcountry and assigned in Dai Loc District in the province of Quang Nam. We were in a Marine operating area, so we were kind of orphans. But I have to say that the Marines really took care of us in many ways and treated us very well. They used to joke about us being the Lost Army unit. We lived down in a team house in the village itself. The village itself was very primitive. There's no electricity in the village. There's no running water. There are no toilets. And the people in Vietnam basically didn't go very far from their home villages. When it came down to, did they support the VC? Did they support the central government? Most of them just wanted to be left alone and have their own lives. But of course, the war didn't allow that. We had been fighting the war for 3 years at that time and trying to do it ourselves with American troops, and finally woke up to the fact that that was not going to work out very well. So they started a program of Vietnamization to beef up the advisory forces and to get the Vietnamese to be able to handle things themselves rather than supporting us. So I was in on kind of the beginning of that program. I worked with my Vietnamese counterparts, and I had a number of different ones. The big thing about being an advisor and going around in the district to carry out my duties was that you never set a pattern so that the VC didn't know where you were going to be. And yet there were times when they could have found out. I was invited out many times to eat at officials' houses or when there was a feast or a festival or something. So if the VC did want to do some damage, they could have got us. But you had your job to do and you just did it. And that meant getting out into the district. And most of the times I went either with an interpreter or by myself because I did speak Vietnamese. We as advisors were trying to portray that things were a lot better security-wise, because you could drive around in the district in the daytime and you could visit by yourself. You had to be careful. But when I went out, I didn't wear a flak jacket and didn't wear a helmet, except for a few times on operations or patrols at night. But you wanted to get across to the people that things were being pacified. There were sections in the district that the VC controlled and the ARVN forces couldn't go into without a battle, but the majority of the district was under the government's control, at least at that time. During Little Tet, which was the summer of '68, the follow-on to the Tet that people do hear about, the VC tried again to come up with a victory, you might say. And in our particular district, that meant that they burned a number of our villages. And I remember the first time I went into a village after the VC got done with it and saw just how barbaric they were and what they were capable of doing. They destroyed schools because they didn't want the kids to be educated. So one of my jobs was to help with rebuilding new schools. Assassinated our village chiefs in various ways. One I remember was a bomb under his desk when he came to work in the morning. So they generally were raising hell in the district for a number of months. For us personally down in the village, they'd mortar us a lot. But the war, I guess, for me got personal at one point because they dropped a mortar round into my Jeep and the shrapnel from it went up and took out our shower as well. After that, I thought, well, that's enough of that.